up. You know, the late models, the modifieds, those guys, you know, they're great. You know, they're race cars, they're chassis cars, and they got the big engines and the humper tires, and you know, and 900 horse, and that's awesome. But when you see these guys getting the street stocks, the Camaros and the Monte Carlos and the Mercury Cougars, and these guys, they got a manhandle them around, you know, the big tracks and the bull rings, and that is just that's racing right there. I mean,
the only real thing they have is maybe some steering quickeners or something like that.
There's not a whole lot of technology on these race cars. We start comparing them to the upper divisions, and the main event from Saturday night for the street stocks was absolutely spectacular. These guys, that's when I started feeling my voice going, was during that race. But you know, Kevin Roberts, we've mentioned his name a couple times.
Alan's dad.
Yeah, he was fast qualifier and had his work cut out for him. He did win the dash. The heat race.
He was quick a couple weeks ago too. I was down there.
He was, and he was in a stacked heat race. I mean, his heat race. Listen to this. This was the fast heat for the street stocks. We had Jody Tanner, Don Stroud, J.J. Irvine, the Mikey Breakall car that was being piloted by Kyle Yak, because Mikey had some important event like prom or something.
Whatever.
Mark Gaylord and the green Camaro and Kevin Roberts. Those are the 6 cars in his heat race, and those guys from the heat race, I knew, okay, tonight's main event is something that this is going to be one of those races that you want to see.
You got Gaylord in there, you got Roberts in there, you got Yak in there.
J.J. Irvine in the K4 pulls off the win, and I was like, wow, J.J. is coming alive in this 4. I mean, he was one of those guys you said, hey, look, you know he's going to be in the mix for the win in the feature. And he's a veteran driver. He's got a good little car, fast little hot rod. He's a good driver, keeps it clean. And you knew he was going to be in the mix after that heat race win, and he was feeling good about his program. That being said, we got into the feature, and oh my gosh, it was just one of those deals where in qualifying, something that kind of surprised me was Justin Evans. We know how fast Justin is. I mean, he's one of the guys you got to talk about in that class. It was actually 11th fast. So a little off his game. So he had
trying something new, I wonder.
You never know with that Evans gang and old man Al over there. Those guys you never know. But he started deep in the field, was on the move in the early stages of the race. I think it was lap 7. He had moved from deep in the field, was sitting 3rd or 4th, and you got to remember this is the part of the program where we really saw the talk of the night. The biggest subject was track conditions. With all the rain the night before, Chris Novziger did absolutely everything he could to manipulate the track
I heard he got a little bit of rough.
Oh, if it was a little bit of rough, it would have been nice. It was, thank God dwarf cars weren't there. You wouldn't have seen them in the ruts. You know what I mean? It's just one of those deals where Mother Nature wasn't kind of the track. Chris arm wrestled her a little bit for, to give us a good track. And he did. I mean, you couldn't have done a better job given the circumstances. But these guys, in the main events, we started seeing some real rough conditions in the lower groove of the turns, and I think that's what happened with Evans. He caught that rut, and I talked to him on the phone a couple days after the race, gave those guys a couple times, a little bit to cool off and kind of get on their program. And he said he hooked that rut. He said it just hunkered the car down and it twisted. The axle was twisted to where it snapped it in half. He did it. I mean, as soon as the car, he lost the left rear, he just hammered on the throttle because he was sitting sideways and spun it around, so his nose to tail. Everybody, I mean, it happened in a pack of cars, and he's in the lead group, and everybody split him. Nobody, got a piece of him.
So fast.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are.
These guys are street stocks and stuff. I mean, don't give them wrong. These guys are still. I mean, they're pushing 80 mile an hour average down the straightaway. Yeah. These guys are fast.
Yeah. So it took him out early in the race, which was a bad deal for him. He's one of those guys that's just perfection. You talk about perfectionist. That's how Justin Evans works. His mind in 100 laps, he'll say, well, lap 45 could have been a little better. That's just how he thinks. But it took him out. But that left. I mean, I'm talking. It left those top 6 cars in that heat race to make their way through traffic and get up front. And we saw Roberts and Gaylord and Yak and Irvine and Jody Tanner got in the mix there for a little bit. I mean, these guys went bumper to bumper. They went door handle to door handle. We saw them going 3 wide for the lead.
That was our biggest
3 wide for the lead. And I'll tell you, you didn't know. You just didn't know how this one was going to turn out. I mean, if it was going to be Roberts or Irvine. Or, I mean, it was just one of those deals where it was just absolutely amazing racing, bumper to bumper. I mean, I can remember watching these guys come out of turn 2, and at that point, the leader was Irvine, and he's got his hands full holding off Roberts and Gaylord, and Kevin just had enough drive to get up behind him out of the turn and run a little high side, put his bumper on Irvine's bumper, and they went down the backstretch like that, wide open. And I know JJ felt it because you could see that little bump from the booth, and JJ knew he was there. But in the end, Roberts got to the front and held off Kyle Yak in the 13 of Breakall. Gaylord finished 4th, and Irvine was right there for 4th. Jody Tanner, I mean, the old guy out there racing. He finished in the top 5 after pulling double duty. I mean, this guy was on the racetrack all night long, whether it was the street stock or the sportsman. He landed in the top 5. It was just one of those deals where these guys really had to be careful with the ruts.
Right.
Really had to drive the car without knocking out their fillings and their teeth, and keep the car smooth, because when they started bouncing around those street stocks, it's a whole different ballgame.
They don't have a lot of the suspension like, like the modifieds and the late models. I mean, at least they have some sort of travel. These guys, run on, most of them run on leaf springs in the rear. They run on, stock shocks sometimes in the front with springs. Some manufacturer springs. But you talk about 3 wide at your track. You have that 60 foot wide turns. We got 40 to 60 foot wide, and they were going 3 wide. Literally, that's what kept every single race fan there at Sunset Speedway with the Bridgeport Logistics, street stocks on their feet, because every restart, would take off.
That was the deal here. The restarts were.
They would go 3 wide.
Yeah.
Literally, it was 5 rows back of 2 by 2 by 2.
Well, and then
they were 3 wide. It was crazy.
In our street stock feature, we saw. Roberts ultimately led the last lap, but we saw Mark Gaylord lead. We saw Irvine lead. We saw Kyle Yak right there in the mix. I mean, these 4 guys, it was absolutely incredible. And I left Willamette that night going, I can't wait to watch that field of cars the rest of the year. It was just that exciting. The crowd was into it. Those guys, and those are race car drivers right there. Those cars they don't have the Hanley, they don't have the 4-bar, they don't have the coilovers and the 5th arms and the pull bars.
All of that suspension to be able to work with. They have very little, and to do what they do. You talk about here years ago, street stocks and some of these 4Bs. They used to be just filler divisions, for the modifieds and the late models and the super late models, the sprint cars and stuff. I'm telling you now, these guys,
they could be the feature on any given night.
The feature event, because you get some of these other guys, the late models, whatever, and they go out and hey, it's good to go. But you get some of the the street stock guys, I mean, or the 4Bs. I mean, these guys run nose to tail, side by side every single lap. It is, and talk about Brian Roden. Came from the back, started 18th after losing a tire, came back up on the track, restarted and finished top, top 5, top 3. Could have had that one. It was anybody's race. That's the crazy part about these street stock guys now, especially Willamette Speedway. They have all that racing room, and they use
got a lot of room to race.
Sunset Speedway, you have small racing room, but they use every little bit
inch. You have to, but
crazy to watch these guys now.
It was awesome. I'm a big fan of that street stock division, and
they're coming up. And a lot of these guys too, they used to race, late models or modifieds, and say, hey, you know what?
We're seeing guys that ran late models, the 900 horsepower cars, 800, 750 horse, jumping down these street stocks, and
Kyle Yak.
And what do they say? Oh, I'm having so much fun.
So much fun.
I'm having so much fun, and ultimately that's what we do,
They can run side by side and not have to worry about tearing stuff up. They can run door handle, and hey, if they bump tires or if they bump, fenders, whatever, hey, it's a fender, not, you're not spending a whole bunch of money trying to replace sheet metal.
Right.
They're not as finicky, to replace something if something happens. And that's, I think, why a lot of these guys that do run these upper classes, late models, street stock, whatever, go down to the street stock. Because it's so intense. You have such a driving talent there. Like you said, some of the girls and stuff that are driving. Okay, who won here a couple weeks ago in a heat race? Very first time out. She killed him. She drives hard,
patient but smooth,
and everything else. But these classes and stuff now, the street stock division, I believe, has grown so much here in the Northwest. That it is, a lot of people come just for that. It is sometimes the feature.
Well, I think that they probably draw more cars per class, or more fans per class than anybody.
It's a cheap division to get into, ton of fun. You don't have to spend a bunch of money to get into it.
Exactly. Sportsman Racing, the Sportsman division at Willamette Speedway. You know, it's kind of a funny thing because we knew, you know, when we talked about this during the winter, you know, with the Super Sport division being what it is, with the retro rules, the no tops, the wedge noses, sideboards, that was going to affect car count somewhere. Whether it was the late models or whether it was the class below them in the Sportsman.
Right.
There's guys that are going to want to move up. There's guys that want to move down. And we've seen a little bit of that with the cars that are in that class. That I think it really hit the Sportsman class the most. You know, we had 9 guys show up in the Sportsman class, but we saw 9 A-main cars. I mean, these cars were, you know, they're just really good race cars. You know, the Sportsman Fast Qualifier, Tom Yak. You're going to hear the name Yak a lot from Willamette Speedway this week. Tom Yak was the Fast Qualifier. And under, it wasn't prime conditions for the track. You know, we've talked about that, but he was still win a 16.647. You know, on a 3-link suspension and slick tires, and this, you know, a car that was once a modified. That was, you know,
and now
turned into
over, yeah.
Right. Tom was Fast Qualifier.
He was fast a couple weeks ago and stuff.
He's been Fast Qualifier. He's won the Dash. He loves that race car. It works absolutely phenomenal. But I think, you know, it's going to be a tough deal with that Sportsman class this year. We got to get more cars in that class because it's so competitive. It's one, you know, dollar for dollar. And again, it's right there with the street stocks on watching the competition.
Well, you could bring some of these older late models and stuff that came out.
It doesn't take a whole lot, yeah.
And either reskin them or whatever. Throw some you know, sideboards back on them, and you don't have to run the 900 horsepower motors. You know, you can run, you know, a stock 350. You can run a cam in or whatever the case.
Yeah, let's talk about that because in that Sportsman main event, Tom Yak he dropped a driveline. You know, he was at that point was clearly the fastest race car on the track, and these guys were going to have a hard time beating the 49. I mean, they were just going to have a hard time beating him.
And the drama keeps
but, you know, that goes to show you how hooked up that racetrack was, even that late in the program, to rip a driveline out of the car. I mean, he was really putting the power on the ground. Dropped a driveline. It cost him his night. That gave the lead to Chad Slover in the 25 car, who, you know, Chad's car was fast. The problem with it, the setup underneath him, he was really struggling with. That car was so soft. And by when I say soft, I mean he's putting so much on the ground. He's carrying the left front tire the entire straightaway, setting it down just before the entry of the turner. Setting it down, and when he set it down, the car would get tight, kind of wash up on him, and they, you know, the rest of the field caught him. He had a pretty good lead. They caught him. Jeff Rash got by him, took over the top spot, led the last 2/3 of the race, and Hackney's other driver, Clyde Rude, and the Zero got by Slover as well for a Hackney 1-2 finish, which
that's good for Hackney.
You know, that's good for Hackney Racing. It is, and he was definitely happy with his drivers. Slover held on to finish 3rd, and listen to this: in the steel-bodied Camaro, Jody Tanner was 4th. He was 4th again. You know, that little steel-bodied Camaro against these guys. You know, chassis cars. Still finished in the 4th spot. It's had Eric Lindquist, Trent Croy. Made a return to Willamette from Gresham in the 95C, and so, you know, there was some good race cars. And I mean, you look at the lap times in qualifying, 16.6 on the track on those cars. That's pretty impressive. I mean, it really was. It was a good race, but unfortunately, Tom, the points leader, he's going to have a hard time handling the points lead after Rash picked up that win. And Jeff Rash was. He realized what was going on the racetrack, did a great job of driving. You see these guys come in, they're hitting the ruts, or they're trying to miss the ruts and drive around the top and carry the momentum. Jeff was as cool as it gets. Entry on the into turn 3, he just kind of, you'd see him lift, turn the car in, drive around the ruts on the outside, almost asphalt-like with the nose point. He wasn't trying to back it in, wasn't, you know, trying to drive the late model style racing you see sometimes with the Sportsman. Just very smooth, and he knew that to win that race, he had to be smooth, and it's what got him. I mean, he drove just
congratulations on that team.
Yeah, consistent lap after lap, and did a heck of a job of driving. Picked up the win, so that's a good win for him. Got the big check and the trophy. And then Rude, you know, snuck in there in the late stages to get by Slover in the last couple laps for the 2nd place finish. So that was a good deal for for Hackney, and we'll see what old Tom Yak does, because you know that I'm sure that car is already fixed and ready to go, because those guys over there in Crawfordsville, they don't mess around. Then after our Sportsman division, Josh, it was one of the strangest races I've watched in a while, and the fact that it wasn't just chaos, but it was